What's up, you guys? Welcome back to Tidal Gardens. Every now and again, we get some new toys to play with. And this is a special episode because this particular toy is super exotic and super custom. So let's go take a look. This story, you guys, starts with one of these. Next door, we were having an issue with some dinoflagellates, and I needed to get another UV sterilizer. Now, if you've ever tried to source one of these Pentair units, it is not that fun. They are extremely expensive if you can find them, and I was having no luck. But then I remembered that Raj from MRC, he is a distributor of Pentair, I believe. So I quickly asked him if he could price me out some of these at wholesale, and he said he can. However, he happened to have an orphan project that might work better for my application, something worth taking a look at. So I'm like, well, I'm intrigued. I don't know what that might end up looking like, but anytime that I can get into exotic MRC stuff, I'll definitely take a look. So this is what Raj had in mind. This is an MRC iSump. There are several standard versions of this particular sump. This guy measures about 48 by 24 by what looks to be 22 to 24 inches tall. Now, these things are highly customizable. And he happened to have what he would call an orphan project because the original people that had ordered this, whenever you get into like professional design, what often happens is design specs change. Some projects get dragged on long enough that their funding runs out. They don't need a particular item or something like that happens. So he happened to have this unused iSump. And it is particularly interesting because on the other side here, it has 6 UV bulbs integrated into the body. And that kind of is massively overkill for what I needed. That sump is filtering this entire system here, which is 5 500-gallon aquariums plus roughly a 500-gallon sump. At the same time, I was also curious what the effect of having that much UV is. Now, the MRC UV bulbs, according to Raj, they are custom and they emit twice the UVC per watt of a standard UV. Technically, I could measure that. I could pop open this lid. There's, I don't know, 16 or a dozen or so titanium screws. And I've got one of those ITC light meters that can detect all the way into the UVC range, stick it down in there and get a reading. I'm honestly not that curious. So 6 bulbs is probably vastly overkill for my application. So we decided instead just to run them 3 bulbs at a time. And even that might be overkill because one of these bulbs is roughly equivalent to one of the Pentair 80-watt units. And that's all we were doing here. So even running 3 bulbs is triple the capacity. Okay, let's go over how this guy functions. The way that we have this particular thing set up, we are sending water into it with a Deltec 16 that's down here sitting in this pre-chamber of our main sump. I mean, we call this like they call these an iSump, and they're mainly made to function as sumps. In this configuration, I would consider it more just like a filter because it's not technically the main sump. Now, the other nice thing about running it with like a controllable pump like that Deltec, like an Abiz, like an Ecotech, is you can control the flow rate through this system very carefully. You can adjust the flow rate that's going to be going through the filter roller. You can adjust the flow rate that's going past your UV. Very good for control. Water comes up. We have it braced in using fiberglass unistrut in stainless steel clamps. Ideally, these would not be stainless steel, they would be titanium, but you work with what you got. Comes up and into this filter roller. We have been playing with this filter roller now for a few weeks, and I have to say I'm super impressed with it. It's very basic and bare bones. Like, it pretty much does what it's supposed to do. Once the water level gets to a certain point in the unit, the float switch triggers, the control box advances the roll for 3 seconds, which is not the entire length of like the collection chamber there. It is just enough to allow all of that water to pass through. So you can actually see it when it gets kind of like close to the limit. This roll advances and that water level drops all the way down, even though only a small portion is actually new filter roll. It's kind of hard to tell how much has really been used versus how much is still available, but all the rumors of this lasting every bit of 6 months to a year seems to be about on point. We're still playing with this, trying to find ways to quiet it down just a little bit. But once the water level in this chamber rises just a little bit, the amount of noise coming out of the filter roller is pretty minimal. And from 5 feet away, you really can't hear it very easily. I mean, it kind of blends in with pretty much all the other sights and sounds of a sump. Now, everybody was wondering, including myself, how does this thing smell? Or I should probably say, how does this thing not smell? Because I'm 6 inches away from this and I cannot smell it. I mean, granted, I'm a little bit congested, but I don't think that anybody is gonna like run one of these things and be like, oh my gosh, it gassed out my entire house. Like, it's surprisingly not smelly. So, thumbs up. I had heard that well in advance that, these things don't smell. And I'm like, well, how is that possible? Not sure, but it's so far so good. I mean, it is simply just not that smelly. Okay, taking a look at the other side of this MRC iSump, we have the water cascades down from that into this main chamber. And here you see those 6 bulb UVs. Currently, the top 3 are running, the bottom 3 are not. This here's the power supply for it. It's in its own weather sealed case. And you can see top 3 lights are on, bottom 3 are not. It was not super fun to load these guys in here because if you might be wondering like how like the water dynamics goes in this particular sump. There's baffles in here which makes it so that these bulbs are always submerged. So if, for example, that Deltec pump like loses power or something like that, this sump doesn't just drain out completely. Like it'll drain like this last compartment, but this particular UV stage will always stay submerged. So that's kind of a design issue with some of the other external UVs, is that when there's no water in it and that bulb doesn't turn off, it becomes a fire hazard. And I have personally known some people that have burned their place down because of a UV related fire. Less risk of that here, it's in its own compartment. Now, when it comes time to service these bulbs, you can unscrew these guys right out of here. Now, here's where I'm kind of living with the design of the previous group that had commissioned this sump. Normally, the way that these things are organized is that they're top loading. So instead of being like directly drilled into the side of the sump, they load from the top. There must have been a reason why they didn't do that. My guess is they couldn't physically have like the height necessary to service the bulbs. I mean, here we need about like, 20 something inches to slide these bulbs out. You would need at least that above the sump in order to do this top loading design. Now, I prefer that top loading design because if you do need to get at this, you also have to drain out this chamber, which is every bit of like 5 to 10 gallons of water. Otherwise, you're just going to be spilling salt water all over the place. Now, if this was top loading, all of that is kind of like sealed onto itself. There's no real leak risk. I mean, there might be salt creep, but it's not the end of the world. So that would be one design change that had I designed this thing from scratch for my application, That's what I would do, top loading rather than side loading. But you go to war with the army that you have, this works perfectly good, and so far so good on the seals. Once the water progresses past the UV stage and comes down into this last chamber, theoretically, you can do probes, you can do dosing in here. Currently, we don't have anything, and sometimes doing nothing is the best plan because that allows for some future flexibility. Now, the water will come out mainly through this 2-inch bulkhead. So we had to drill this guy ourselves and install a 2-inch gate valve. This 2-inch Spears gate, it's always an adventure to source. Because if you want some sticker shock, go look at how much people are asking for 2-inch Spears gates. I went to my normal wholesaler, supplyhouse.com, and they wanted $400 for this thing. I'm like, yeah, I don't know if I need to control this thing that bad, because the reason why you do this is you put some back pressure on the water. So this thing completely fills with water and you get no gurgling, slurping, water cascading sound. This is dead silent. Now, at $400, it's like, do I want it that dead silent? Yeah, probably. But, shopping around a bit, I was able to find this for $112. So my guess is somebody just had it for ages in their inventory that they might have bought from the 90s, who knows? And they never really updated their pricing because these things are crazy expensive right now. Anyways, lucky me, I got one. Now, just in case, anytime that you have a drain gated off like this, you want to also cut in an emergency. And so we have an 1.5-inch emergency drain. Just in case something gets like goofy with like maybe somebody accidentally closes this, maybe some way, somehow, something large gets through the 50-micron membrane, through the UV, into this chamber, and then somehow blocks a 2-inch gate. I don't know. We're just spitballing here. Something blocks this guy. You do want a secondary thing. Always good practice. We have this guy up a little bit higher, and he drops back down. Now, the reason why we have it designed where the pump and the return are kind of more or less in the same chamber is just in case the main return pump for this entire system, which is an Abyss A400, if for some reason that guy stops. It's never really happened before, but just in case, if something were to cause that pump to stop, this single chamber here would then just recirculate. Like, I don't want to be drawing water from it and then sending the water like past this thing, because then at that point, this thing can drain, and then you have your Deltec that's feeding this guy running dry. It's like if that main source of flow through the main system, that main sump goes down, at least this will sit here and recirculate. All right, guys, that pretty much does it for a walk around of that MRC iSump. Thank you so much for the sponsor of this video, MRC. They do pretty much all of our skimmers. They make the filter rollers here. We're always game to try out new professional equipment that they've got going on. That pretty much does it from here. Happy reefing.